People who have developed film. What is the most shocking thing you have ever seen on a customer's camera? NSW. Had a mother come in and develop a roll she found in a drawer. It was some family pics and then about 11 of her teenage son getting head from some chick. 90s equivalent of accidentally sending your nudes to mom. I used to work loss prevention at Walmart back in the late 90s. One day I got paged to the photo lab and the tech asked me if she should call the police. She handed me a set of black and white photos that she had just developed and they seemed to be photos of dead bodies. One had a guy hanging from a tree. Another was a girl in a tub with her throat slit. I went through the stack and see if there are any live people in them. We called the police and waited for them to come. An officer and detective showed up and looked through the photos and asked if we had the customer's information available. The tech read off the customer's name and from behind us, we hear someone say yes. Double quote. There's a 20-something-year-old guy and girl standing there. The detective starts asking them questions when the officer says to me, "Isn't that the dead guy and girl in these pictures?" We look at them and as we figure out that they were faked scenes. The detective is told the same thing by the couple. They were shooting for scenes for an art gallery and really didn't think anything was wrong. Old lady would bring in a disposable camera about once every 2 weeks. 95% of the pictures were of the TV. She would see something she wanted to buy off of the home shopping network and wanted to remember to get it later, so she took a screenshot. I once had a 20-ish-year-old develop photos of her giving a BJ, complete with pearl necklace at the end. The full pornster treatment. She came in to pick them up with her dad, and the look on her face when she opened the envelope to check the pics was priceless. She'd clearly forgotten what was on that roll of film. I, however, will never forget. Did 1-hour photo at a drugstore. Weirdest roll. 9 shots of Christmas with the family. 5 shots of 2 girls shaving each other's pubic hair in a bathtub. Then the rest of the roll was back to Christmas with the family. I worked at a CVS photo lab like 14 years ago. Back then, the developed pictures would fall from the top of the machine into a shelf below, and a motorized arm would push pictures off to the side into a neat little stack. I threw in a roll for development right before lunch, came back, and the photo on top was some dude's dong, clear as day. It had been sitting there in plain sight for at least 45 minutes. Dong pics were a common occurrence, but I found this scenario particularly funny. I once developed pictures for a guy who had pics of himself in his underwear and hiking boots out on a trail. Then there was another group from someone else of detailed pictures of a deer that had failed at jumping a decorative fence and impaled itself on the top. Many years ago I worked the night photo lab shift at a Walgreens. I saw more than my fair share of intercourse, boobs and general things you would expect someone to bring in at 2 AM to be ran. But the most memorable was a guy that worked at a local strip club. He came in every 2 or 3 weeks with several rolls shot of stage shows and in the dressing room of all the girls. He would wait on them to get done then stand there at the counter going through them trying to show them to me. A 360-degree view of a naked girl on her knees. It was relatively softcore, but I thought it was so odd that the dude had shot 24 photos in a circle around her. Also, pictures from a bachelor party. The party went sound. People were covered in vomit. There were strippers. I did about 500 double takes while processing that one. I used to work at a Walgreens in the photo lab and was standing there watching a stack of photos print off. They appeared to be of an Easter party for some young children at first. Then it went to all the children sitting at a dining room table with their Easter baskets in front of them. First picture, they looked happy. Second, they were frowning. Third, downright crying. By the 4th or 5th it became apparent what their issue was. There was a giant stem of broccoli in each of their baskets. I worked at Ritz Camera around 2000. One day a woman came in with a cop and explained that she had a roll of film with her stillborn baby on it. The cop was there to verify it wasn't illegal. She was beyond nervous. She asked if I could make it look like the baby was alive. The stillborn pics were bluish grey, so I did what I could to warm it up since Ritz guaranteed the best colors possible. She was thankful. I took the next day off and the cop came back later to explain that the woman lost her uterus due to some complication during the birth. The lady just wanted to remember her only chance at having a kid. Well, other than boobs and dongs, I developed film for some older lady whose 50-year-old son went missing. They found his body in a field 8 days afterwards, and even though it wasn't his actual body, it was of where his body was in the picture. Think of a snow angel but in a patch of tall grass and completely black and bloody. It also turned out I was the last person to see this guy alive. I sold him batteries. Oddly enough, this lady thinks that her other son killed him, so I'm not sure what about it was more shocking. The fact that it was a photo from a crime scene, or the fact that I saw this dude the night he got murdered. A man came in with a few cans of 8mm film to be processed and digitized. It was something he'd had in the attic since the 70s. I think they belonged to my dad and he recently passed away and was curious as to what was on them. He came in with his wife and kids and was full of anticipation and nostalgia. Most reels we got at this processing company were Christmas or holiday videos full of happy times long forgotten. I processed the reels and then captured the footage onto the computer. I then knew I had a difficult conversation to have and started trying to figure out what to say. Instead of a happy family home movie with his dad and the family bringing back warm memories, there were 4 reels of his dad, handlebar mustache, shell suit, wanking furiously on the bonnet of a Ford Capri. The next day, his beaming son turned up with the family to collect the reels. Normally we play a section back in the studio just to show them it's all worked and they're happy with the quality, but I just had to take him aside and say, you might not want to show the family this. Childhood ruined. He'd discovered a film of his dad wanking in the attic. I'm sorry, sir. The film was bad. Nothing could be recovered. This story is about a former co-worker of mine's. I used to work at a big health store. Some of the stores can develop pictures. We usually deny requests to develop pictures near closing because it would be too time consuming as we have other closing duties. Apparently some guy came in and pleaded with my co-worker, telling him that he needed these pictures out as soon as possible and that he'll be back in an hour or so to pick them up. So my co-worker decided to develop pictures. That's when he realized all of the photos were just snaps of freaking crap. Like crap on the toilet, crap in the grass, crap on a chair, just crap. Obviously the guy didn't come back and my co-worker was freaking livid. Hands down the funniest thing a co-worker has told me. I still give him crap about it when I come in to visit. Poor guy, like he need any more crap. A murder scene. I worked at a grocery store in the lobby, so I developed a lot of film. This was a picture of a man laying in bed missing the majority of his head, next to a shotgun. We called the police and they waited for the person to pick the film up. He was actually a detective and needed it processed right away, so he gave it to me knowing full well what was on it, instead of using the police lab. I was young and it was probably one of the worst things I have seen. Worked as a custom black and white printer. Saw lots of nudity, but the weirdest thing I saw was when I was putting together a large order of old family pictures. Lots of pictures of children growing up through the 50s and 60s. About halfway through the order I realized one of the children was Sigourney Weaver. The craziest photo I ever saw was an old white man wearing a strap-on, fricking a young lady from behind, while an obese black woman slapped his butt. People seemed to be watching in the background, so I still have no idea what was going on. It was the only photo I ever made a copy of for myself so I could put it on my fridge. I figured my roommates at the time would never believe me. Funniest moment, though, was when a guy walked in and said, "So, do you develop photos?" "Yes," I replied, politely, even though it was a dumb question. "Well, CVS developed my negatives, but they won't print my photos because of what's on them." "Will you, sir? As long as there's no kids in them, I really don't give a crap." "No, it's just me. But since I already have the negatives, I only want to develop the ones I like." "Sure, why not?" So, I turned on the backlight and we proceeded to discuss which self-portraits of his dong were actually worthy of printing. To be fair, if I was hung like this guy, I would have made posters and hung them in my living room. Back in 1990 I was 16 and I worked for a privately owned 1-hour photo in a truck stop. My boss was known for developing anything people brought in, except child pee and bestiality, which were illegal, and so I saw a lot of homemade pee when I was 16. This was before the internet and I was just a naive young girl. It was really bizarre for me. My favorites was this skanky couple in their 50s and they always brought in pictures of themselves fricking while smoking crack. Usually it would be her giving him head while he smoked a crack pipe. He had a large purple head on his dong. He was not circumcised. It was pretty shocking. Then in 1995 I got on the internet and nothing was shocking after that. I work at a 1-hour photo lab. Some lady printed out pictures of her infant son's circumcision. That one was probably the most shocking to me. We had a woman come in who was probably in her 50s. She tried to print out some nude pictures of herself. Me and my co-worker had to explain to her that we couldn't print them because it was against company policy. She got mad and told us, but I still look good for my age. See, like as if we were going to agree with her and let her do it. This one's not really shocking, but it makes me laugh when I think about it. I had a little old lady come in one day to print out some pictures. She calls me over to the kiosk and asks for my opinion. She has a bunch of selfies and wants to know which one is the best because she is going to try online dating and needs a good profile picture. The saddest one was a lady who was about 45-50 years old. She came in to get some pictures of herself printed. She said she was trying to choose pictures for her obituary because she'd just been diagnosed with some disease and doctors told her she may not live past another 6 months. I really had no words for that one. Completely caught me off guard. Most pictures I print are of vacations, family, friends, babies, pets, etc. But this one still haunts me. I'm pretty sure it's been over 6 months since I seen that woman. Makes me wonder how she is. During my time in a Walgreens photo lab years ago, the funniest thing I recall seeing was a roll of film from a party. The guy who dropped the disposable camera off appeared in one of the pictures in tighty whities wearing a cowboy hat, boots, and a belt with toy 6 shooters while he was chugging a bottle of Miller Lite. The creepiest involves a story. An older man in his 50s or so came in looking really nervous. When he dropped off his film, he had a weird rambling story he gave me about how his son and daughter-in-law abused his granddaughter, who was about 4, and that his lawyer instructed him to take some pictures. So not to worry about what I saw because his lawyer said it was okay. His granddaughter was not in the kind of poses you'd think a lawyer would tell you to take to prove abuse, and there weren't marks on her or anything. It was pretty sickening. As per company policy, we called the police, developed the film, and made a second set to turn over to the police, with the address, phone number, name the customer gave us, as evidence. We weren't ever told what happened, but I never saw the guy again, so I hope he's in prison. About 5 years ago I worked at a Walmart photo lab. At the time I was by far the youngest employee and everyone else in the photo lab could have easily been my grandmother. There was an online order system at the lab where a person could submit pictures online. They would print out, and then the customer could come pick them up. When a person submitted an online order, a little label would print out with the person's name and how many of each size of picture they wanted. One fateful afternoon a label printed out with the name John Doe, which I remember laughing at briefly. I went over to the printer to grab the order as it printed and boom, a text 10 inches glossy of Tub Girl. You haven't truly seen Tub Girl until you've seen it 8x10 glossy. Anyway, about this time the label printer started spewing out orders non-stop with names like LOLOLOL, 133,713,371,337, and frick you. I ran over to the computer to see that about 100 online orders had been submitted and most of the pictures were either memes or insults. My 60-year-old female boss then came to see what was up. I tried to explain to her that people were playing a prank on us and we needed to shut down the lab. She understood but insisted on seeing the pictures, despite my warnings. You ever seen a internet noob exposed to all the filth of the internet in the span of 30 minutes? 'Cause I have. It ain't pretty. Ultimately we shut down for a few hours and cancelled any orders that came from the internet. We called the cops but since there was no CP they didn't really care to do anything. The thing was this went on for months. Not to that extreme but at least once a week for as long as I worked there. At one point someone printed off a screenshot that had a web URL in it, which led to some board over at 4chan. I went and looked at it and it had some instructions on how to troll a Walmart by submitting fake orders. The worst part was it didn't say to whatever Walmart you felt like submitting to, it said to submit specifically to the one where I worked. All in all it wasn't that big a deal but I did get to explain what a rickroll is to a bunch of old women, so that was neat. Used to work a few different places. Probably the most shocking was traffic accident photos from the police. The one that sticks in my head is an arm dangling out of an SUV window. Obviously the guy was dead, and it just seemed so sad. The grossest was industrial accident photos. flayed hands caught in machinery, etc. Also lots of people being naughty for the camera. Worked at the Walmart photo lab circa 2006. It was actually a really chill job and I saw my fair share of weird nudity and even a woman in a fancy hotel room with a towel folded in the shape of a cobra going up a hoo-ha. However, by far the weirdest thing I've ever experienced was a roll of film that had all of these awesome dynamic action shots of this one dude. It was him diving into water from tall rocks, skydiving, dirt bike riding, etc. He was doing all of these amazing things and I was getting so jealous, but also excited to talk about this with him when he came in. I like to have a relationship with the cool customers, but then I got to the end of the roll of film. It was him, in a casket. He had died. I never found out how it happened or anything, but it was just one of those shocking moments that sticks with you. I didn't expect him to be dead after watching him live his life to the fullest like that. I was unlucky enough to develop child P once. We called the cops of course, who required copies and instructed us to package the film as normal and call them after the customer came in for their pictures. When they came in it was tense and they opened their pics and flipped through them like nothing was unusual. Super creepy. No idea what came of it other than one angry phone call from the customer about us getting their name on a list again. Never heard from or saw them again. Also, these were regular customers we'd known for years, and the pics were of their children. I was a head photo specialist for Walgreens in college. We sold a reusable disposable camera that would get loaded with film for free every time they brought it in for 1 hour processing. 2 young girls were with an older man and they brought in a camera for development. The pictures began innocent enough, but around 10 images and they became very graphic. I immediately covered the drying rack and alerted my store manager. One look at the images and he had the local PD on the phone. About an hour later the girls came in to pick up their images and the police stepped in to speak with them. The older man was in the car waiting, so another officer went outside and brought him in. Turns out the man was one of the girl's father, and while he was working his daughter and her best friend decided to do their best to mimic images they found browsing the internet. The images and negatives were destroyed and the girls were given a lesson on how dangerous this could have been for them and the father. I worked for Walgreens Photo Lab for a couple of years. By far the worst was a series of pictures that this old man came in to get developed. All of them were a close-up of his junk, with a giant keychain, think janitor's keys, tied to a rope hanging off his dong. All of the pictures were of him swinging it around like he was trying to make his dong a clock. You have been visited by the science doggo. Upvote now and you will get high grades and good results within the next week. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.